Welcome back to Outside Views, your go-to source for navigating the endless labyrinth of Brexit absurdities, ironies, and occasionally realities. And today's story is about Brexit tinkering, or as I like to call it, the fine British art of putting duct tape on a sinking ship and calling it seaworthy. Recently, the Labour government under Sir Keir Starmer has been working hard to reset the UK's relationship with the European Union. Reset sounds promising, right? A fresh start, a new beginning, perhaps even the glimmer of a Brexit miracle. But as Owen Parker and Matthew Bishop argue, simply tinkering with the edges of Brexit won't be enough to heal the economic wounds inflicted by a hard Brexit. First things first, let's talk about what this Labour reset actually looks like. It's a cautious, polite handshake rather than the revolutionary embrace some hoped for. Yes, it's significantly better than the previous era of delusion, nostalgia, and Boris Johnson's endless supply of empty slogans. But better than Boris is a low bar. So low, in fact, it barely clears the pavement. Starmer's government has managed to negotiate some tangible improvements, particularly in agri-food exports, youth mobility schemes, and future defense cooperation. And these are undeniably helpful. Think of them as applying soothing aloe vera to Britain's Brexit-induced economic sunburn. Comforting, yes, but far from a comprehensive treatment. The core issue remains the original Brexit settlement, formerly known as the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, or TCA. And this deal, crafted in the fraught days of Theresa May and Boris Johnson, was meant to ensure Britain's glorious independence. In reality, it delivered the kind of economic friction usually reserved for sandpaper conventions. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The TCA is fundamentally a hard Brexit framework, and no amount of surface-level tweaks can disguise that fact. It's thin, it's limited, and frankly, it's outdated. The kind of basic free trade agreement European countries stopped making decades ago. And simply put, it's Brexit's greatest hits album, but every track is a disappointment. Now, Labour's approach, softening some harsh edges of this agreement, is commendable, at least politically. But economically, it's like treating a broken leg with paracetamol. Nice effort, but hardly sufficient. The TCA inevitably restricts deeper economic integration, meaning Britain still suffers lower growth, fewer opportunities for young people abroad, reduced inward investment, and continued xenophobic tensions. This perpetual tinkering risks turning the UK into another Switzerland, but without Switzerland's actual benefits. The Swiss have an endless series of negotiations, yes, but they also enjoy extensive single market access. Britain, on the other hand, has the negotiation part without the integration payoff, like endlessly discussing dessert without ever getting to taste the cake. And here's the deeper, slightly maddening problem. Politicians still pretend the UK can regain pre-Brexit freedoms without accepting any EU rules or shared sovereignty. Spoiler alert, it can't. You can't order a la carte from a set menu without the restaurant getting annoyed. And yet, Britain continues to try. The real solution is clear, but politically uncomfortable. A softer Brexit, which would mean rejoining the European single market, as hard as that one would be. I know. Heresy to Brexiteers and getting quite a blockade from Europeans and Remainers alike. But here's the twist. Starmer's cautious reset ironically preserves and reinforces the Brexit project. By smoothing out the roughest edges, he risks making Brexit just tolerable enough to survive long-term, without ever addressing the fundamental problems beneath. But why such caution from Labour? And the simple answer is electoral fear. Labour is still haunted by the trauma of losing its traditional voters, the infamous Red Wall, back in 2019. And as a result, they are stuck in a cautious loop, afraid that genuine pro-European boldness might upset former Brexiteers. Yet this fear might be misplaced. Political expert Peter Kellner highlights a dangerous oversight. Labour risks alienating its core progressive voters. Already, many of them have turned to the Greens or Lib Dems, and Labour's tentative EU stance won't exactly bring them rushing back. But beyond electoral calculations, there's an even bigger issue. Britain urgently needs substantial economic growth. Labour promised a bold progressive agenda in opposition, but how will they fund it without addressing Brexit's massive economic damage? The UK economy is already billions poorer annually due to Brexit, approximately £100 billion lost in GDP and around £40 billion less in tax revenue. And these figures are staggering, and simply tweaking border checks and youth mobility schemes won't fix them. Some on the left, the so-called Blue Labour faction, argue Britain could embrace a more isolated, self-sufficient economy. Sounds charming in a 1950s sort of way, but it's utterly impractical today. If Britain wants serious industrial policy and state intervention, it needs markets. And where are the closest, largest, richest markets? Just across the channel. Globalization isn't going away, it's evolving. Reshoring of industries is happening, but regionally, within integrated supply chains like those centered in the EU. If Britain continues to stay outside these networks, it risks permanent economic stagnation, stuck in perpetual second gear while Europe accelerates ahead. And meanwhile, Brussels isn't exactly standing still. Post-pandemic, post-Trump and post-Brexit, post-Trump the first time, the EU has become more interventionist, launching massive public investment initiatives like Next Generation EU. And this new European approach, a mix of state intervention and strategic autonomy, is precisely what many on the British left have long championed. Ironically, the EU is now delivering the type of progressive economic policy Britain's Labour Party says it wants, but can't pursue effectively while stuck outside. And let's talk competition. The EU is now effectively Britain's largest competitor, dominating investment in green technology, digital industries and strategic sectors. How can Britain realistically compete when EU members are pumping billions into these sectors through collective public funding? The answer? It can't, not alone, and certainly not from outside the single market. And Brexiteers often complained about the EU's Fortress Europe. Well, post-Brexit, Britain finds itself outside the fortress walls, battling for scraps. And Labour's cautious tinkering won't dismantle these barriers, it simply repaints them slightly friendlier colours. And here's the bottom line. Britain urgently needs growth, investment, and meaningful economic integration with its nearest neighbours. The only credible route to this involves moving significantly closer to the EU, embracing a much softer Brexit, or even rejoining parts of the single market. Only this path offers genuine prospect for substantial, lasting economic improvement. And if Labour truly wants to deliver for the millions who voted them into office, they must overcome their electoral PTSD from 2019. Appeasing former Brexit voters by half-hearted tinkering won't win the next election in 2029. Instead, boldness is required, realigning with Europe, unlocking genuine economic potential, and delivering material improvements voters can see and feel. Ironically, that very boldness could help Labour regain red wall voters too. Imagine Farage and Brexiteers forced onto the back foot, struggling to defend Brexit's disastrous legacy against real tangible improvements brought by closer EU alignment. And suddenly, being pro-Europe would look less like betrayal and more like economic common sense. Ultimately, tinkering at the edges won't cut it. Labour must choose. Either fully address Brexit's economic damage or risk being a timid one-term government, fondly remembered perhaps, but economically ineffective. So thanks for watching this episode of Outside Views, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into Brexit's never-ending saga, and why wouldn't you, then please like, subscribe and ring that bell. And we promise more Brexit absurdity, irony and brutally honest insights to come. Until next time, remember, real problems require real solutions, not just a fresh coat of Brexit paint. And if you want to see another video right now, the next one is right here in the end screen, right next to a video from my newest channel. I would also love your support over there. And whatever of those two you're watching right now, I'll see you there. I'll be back.